I want to do something in between my productions. So also, this is just a tier list, so this is YouTube poop, and you know me in YouTube poop. I mean, you saw my last Space Marine video. Let's actually get into this. Okay, we're gonna start with Warhammer Rogue Trader. Now this is an interesting one. If you guys don't know, Rogue Trader actually wasn't meant to be Warhammer, and this is really what's funny when everybody keeps going back and referencing stuff from like these two eras of Warhammer. It's like, this isn't Warhammer. What happened was Rick Policeley was designing a role-playing sci-fi game, and they wanted to make Warhammer because they wanted to make some new sculpt. And we know this because before Warhammer was a thing, they were already releasing Space Marine models. I mean, LE1 came before Space Marine. Space Marines predate Warhammer. I mean, this isn't really Warhammer. This is the game Rick Priestley was making. They just slapped Warhammer on it so they could get the IP started and make the sci-fi version of the fantasy one, because the fantasy one was doing so well. Additionally, I actually have the rulebook for this one. I have the reprinted version of it. And there's a lot of stuff I like in it, but a lot of stuff I dislike. I mean, the movement itself, especially of vehicles, is so fucking complicated as I'm funny. The fact that you need to have a tech marine to go with a dreadnought to even take it in your list, but it's like not required for any other vehicle, is just wacky to me. And a lot of the rules and stuff are wacky. But at the same time, that's kind of the charm. I mean, literally uses a DM master, which is something that Warhammer, I feel like, should bring back to a degree. I mean, that's how war games were started. War games used to be put on between two forces, and then you would have a dungeon master, for lack of a better phrasing, just being the controlling factor. And I think this executes it perfectly. I mean, all the wacky stuff that carries between games, and the in-game stuff, such as just wacky cards and elements that factor in, make it feel much more like an experience rather than just playing a board game, which is an issue we'll have in some of these later editions. But at the same time, it's the first time they've ever done it, so it's implemented in a very clunky way, which leads it to being very rough. So I think I'm going to put it middle of the road. And I think if every tier list I'm going to do, I'm going to put the first thing in the middle of the road. Because, while it doesn't execute everything perfectly, all the ideas that we'll see in these future editions are the innovation that this started. Speaking of it starting, we're now going to be moving to Red Era of Warhammer, which is Warhammer 2nd Edition. Now, there's a lot of channels that do 2nd edition stuff now, so it's relatively become nostalgic. Miniscape is my personal favorite. He creates this sort of nostalgia for a time period that I was never a part of. And it's really cool to see the old miniatures, because the old miniatures, no offense, have quite a bit of charm to them. And he also has battle reports on his channel, so it's been really interesting to watch those to get a feel for a game that's so radically different than now. I mean, there's so little forces in a lot of these battles that it feels like they're playing lower point games than they actually are. I also wonder how cheap it was to put an army together then, because now it's just too hideously expensive. However, again, we're having a lot of the same issues that we have here. Is these ideas are great, but they get rid of the Dungeon Master, which is a hit against it, but all these don't have Dungeon Masters. And they've also streamlined a bit more to it, but it's also streamlined in a very bad way. They implement a lot of the stuff very bad. However, I think it is an improvement on the original, but I don't know if I would put it in a whole nother tier above. So I'm going to put 2nd edition right here, because it's essentially, they took 1st edition, refined it, and made 2nd edition, so a lot of the same issues from 1st edition are still there, but a lot of more improvements are there for quality of life. Now this comes into the really hard era between these two right here, so I might talk to them as a whole. Now, it's pretty well established that a lot of people online believe 3rd edition is the best edition of Warhammer, And I don't know if I necessarily agree at the beginning of it, because I've taken a look at the core rules, and just in general, all the core rules here work pretty well in isolation of each edition. It's a far improvement on 3rd edition because everything's now probably the most streamlined it ever had been in the era. But they still have kept that rogue trader spirit of a lot of interesting factors. However, I've taken a look at a lot of stuff, and a lot of the stuff isn't really good at the beginning of 3rd edition. It's all the end stuff that say, oh, this is the stuff that's really good. For example, the 3.5 codex. And that's why it's made it so difficult to rank these here. Because, like, do I factor the 3.5? Because 3.5 was played in 4th edition and in 3rd edition. But at the same time, do I just take it in isolation? Because 4th edition builds upon 3rd edition. However, I think because a lot of the good parts of 4th edition is the 3.5 parts, I'm going to put 3 in S tier, and I'm going to put 4th edition in A tier right under it. Now, we're coming back here to 5th edition, and I think 5th edition has a pretty far fall off compared to the other editions. And I've even talked about this in video essays I've done previously. The stuff that saved 5th edition is stuff like that was released for Forge World, and it makes it really hard to sort of justify 5th edition existence, because like 4th edition was good, and then this is just terrible. I mean, I tried playing it myself, and it's just a conundrum, and I think I'll have the same issue with 6th edition, but it's a bit better than 5th. So I'm going to put it down here. Now here is going to be the most controversial one. I really liked 7th edition. Now that might be tainted because of Heresy, but yeah, it is tainted because of Heresy, so I'm gonna move it down here. I think 7th edition is a far improvement on these two editions, and a far improvement on the previous 6th edition that we've had here. But I don't think it's that amazing. Like stuff like the formations, and this is why it's so complicated, because like the core rules of 7th are really good, but stuff like formations makes it really bad. Codex creep made it really bad. So it's like, how do I rank that? And the 6th edition core rules just kind of are clunky. They're very clunky because they tried to fix a lot of things, but as usual, GW does GW things and fixes it in the weirdest way possible. Here's another controversial choice. 8th edition going up. Ooh, do I put it in S or A tier? Ooh, I'm a little biased here because I started with 8th edition. So there's always the bias of the edition you started with being the core version of Warhammer. But at the same time, I think what 8th edition was going for, they executed it perfectly. Therefore, it should be in S tier. And so here's my thing. You have 3rd edition here, and 3rd edition's idea was more narrative-based game that focused it on the story. 8th edition here does something I really like and streamlined everything. And that might sound weird for these next editions that I'm going to complain about the exact same thing, but they're implementing it differently. In 8th edition, they implemented stuff that allowed you to still play the narrative, for lack of a better way of phrasing. I mean, everybody complains about the Force org charts, but that's how real militaries would operate. I mean, you have certain levels of battalions with certain things in a battalion. It just made logical sense. Moreover, you didn't necessarily have to use the Force org charts. I mean, you had open play where there wasn't a thing there. They also streamlined stuff for learning the game easier, and this is why I think 8th is so good, is because they went into this wanting to make a experience that was just as narratively rich as 3rd edition, but as streamlined as they could make it. Not sacrificing the flavor for the streamlining nature. Next here is kind of something I wanted to include here because of the whole debate with 7th edition that I had. Is I played Heresy 1.0, and Heresy 1.0 basically is 7th edition rules, but modified slightly. This is what I mainly played during 9th edition, because 9th edition has its own issues. We'll talk about them when we get there. But this has been something that was being built upon since like 6th edition, and just kept on updating with new era of rules until 8th edition. This stayed in 7th edition, this is the new 8th edition. So, this is kind of complicated to explain because there's like more to discuss in Heresy 1.0 than a normal edition of 40k, because Heresy 1.0 was there since 6th edition, 7th edition, and then technically was still a playable game during 8th edition, just didn't use 8th edition rules. It isn't until later that we get 2nd edition. And you can use all Heresy models within 40k during the time period of this. It took 7th edition's rules and fixed a lot of the issues with 7th edition rules. And also added a lot of its own flavor. I mean, stuff like Primarchs is something that they didn't need a balance in 7th edition, but they needed a balance in Heresy. They also added a lot of interesting units with Heresy, and with all the black books added a lot of flavor. So again, it's the whole thing of primarily the point of the game is to recreate battles within the universe of 40k, and that's what's the most appealing to me, and this executes it perfectly. So I think it should go up here in A tier. It's not quite S tier, because there's a lot of issues to it, and it's really expensive to get in the game. I mean, most of the books are out of print during 9th edition and 8th edition, so getting those black books were next to impossible. So, 9th edition. 9th edition, 9th edition. The edition that had a lot of promise and devastated us all, but should have been expected, like a rich kid fucking up. So, 9th edition is built on the bones of 8th edition. And a lot of people at the time had been complaining about 8th edition being too simple. So what they wanted to do in 9th edition is add stuff that would complicate the game up and make it more interesting. Now, the way they did this was to add more stratagems in the game that would cost you a command point. Now, to try to balance that, you wouldn't start with command point. You would start with a certain amount of command points, and everything you used cost you a command point. For example, say you're taking a battalion, it would cost you a certain amount of command points, which is literally the opposite to 8th edition, where 8th edition went, the more detachments you have, the more command points you have to play with. Now, people debate whether command points are good or not, and I'm not really here to debate if they're good or not, but the whole idea of adding complicating things by adding special rules like they did is where this really gets a lot of people. And this is where I'm going to highlight the differences. Okay, so in Heresy, what you could do playing World Eaters or playing Blood Angels or a melee-based army, I need to get from point A to point B in as fast as time possible so I can get into close combat. In Heresy, they fixed this by allowing you to take jump packs and rhinos with your troops. This will allow you to move up the board faster for a price. So it makes it a double-edged sword. Here in 9th edition with World Eaters, they didn't do that. They just added a shitload of fucking special rules, which makes things way more complicated than it ever needed to be. So, for example, they would be able to, the World Eaters, when they got shot, would then move forward. And they said this was for flavor, but it doesn't specify where they need to move closer. I mean, like, if it was written that it's like, oh, we need to move closer to the specific unit that shot us, that would make a hell of a lot more sense than what they did. But they just were able to move when they got shot. Additionally, stuff like Lord and Vicatus were able to get special rules, which really made 9th edition really annoying because they're not the only army that have special rules. Every army has special rules. Furthermore, you had a lot of bullshit rules there. For example, Gorguts not being able to be killed in one turn is dumb. It really is. They had wound caps on Ghazghkull and Abaddon, which, yeah, I'm an Abaddon fanboy, but like, no. If you're going to put a full army into shooting a guy, put it in. And the reason why they did that is two reasons. One, competitive. 9th edition is really where competitive blew up. I mean, 8th edition got it started, but like, it was in 9th edition when they acknowledged it. And I say this because 9th edition was the era when Games Workshop started to host competitive tournaments in the US and around the world, and not just in the UK. Before, it was sort of this side thing, and it was a side thing in 8th edition, but what I feel like happened is 8th edition, they're like, oh, a lot of people like this competitive thing. And then they saw stuff like CSGO and how much money there is in esports, and they're like, oh, we're gonna do that, but for tabletop. Yeah, I know this is rambling, but let me finish, because this is all negatives against 9th edition. I mean, you had a lot of those bullshit rules there created for the competitive community, because 9th edition was kind of made for the competitive community. They did a lot of testing of competitive stuff in here, and it also marketed to the competitive community. Because remember, guys, 9th edition was the one with broken Eldar, broken Tyranids, broken Dark. Literally every single new codex that came out, except for like 1 or 2, were broken. Like, they literally had to initiate an apology statement for the Leagues of Votann because they were so broken, and the only reason why they did that was because tournaments were threatening to not include the Votann in the tournament. So I think it's pretty clear that, like, the fucking 9th edition was shit. And here's the issue is, 9th edition was good at the start. I mean, base core rules, 9th edition, great. As soon as they added those goddamn codexes, everything went broken. And the issue, a lot of it is a lot of their decisions for balancing. I mean, like, they really should have just balanced everything against the Space Marines Codex, which is the thing they made, and it was the first Codex released. But like the Leagues of Votann, they literally explicitly said, oh no, we were beta testing this against the Tyranids. Why the fuck were you beta testing against Tyranids when you knew the Tyranids were broken? And if you didn't know the Tyranids were broken, but then you found out they were broken later, why aren't you going back and rewriting that? It's the lack of quality control in this era, because they were so big they can't fail, is to not be understated. And at the same time, they did things I fucking love. My favorite way to play Warhammer lately has been boarding actions. I like boarding actions so much. And I liked what they did with Arcs of Omen. I mean, like, being able to take whatever you want, do whatever you want, was freeing and was a hell of a lot of fun, and especially allowed us to do a lot of cool narrative stuff. But, you know, that's like the 6 months at the end, it's 6 months at the beginning. The 3 years that I was here, it's just fucking shit. Don't get me wrong, there's gonna be worse editions, but like, at the same time, there's so many they did wrong here. And that's not even getting in stuff like the price increases. Holy shit. This is easily D tier. Okay, Heresy 2.0. Where do I want to put you? Here's the thing, is I've only played like 3 games of Heresy 2.0. And a lot of this is caused by just not having things that are required. So I was looking to get back into Heresy. In the Heresy army I wanted to make was World Eaters again, but I wanted to make them cross-compatible into 40k and into 30k. So I was looking at the Age of Darkness box set, and then, I noticed they were all Beakies. And I might do a rambling rant someday of why the Beaky was the suboptimal choice for a mark of armor. because I could probably go for 45 minutes on like 7 different points why it wasn't a good choice. And I know why they chose it. I mean, it's pretty clear that they were using it for nostalgia. I mean, all the marketing around the Bickies when they first came out was to highlight Rogue Trader stuff. So it's pretty clear that that's what they were doing. However, I do think it adds quite a bit to the original Heresy. And a lot of the issues is not a core rule issue, it's stuff surrounding the core rules, such as army rules. The army rules this edition are either really good or bad. There's no in between army rules. The reactions are implemented much like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Gacha. I'm much have rather seen alternate activations like you see in Bolt Action. I think that's probably the best alternate activations, because like when I tried the Grimdark Future from one-page rules, I fucking hated playing it, because it made me feel like I'm just playing chess. And that's not to slag off chess, but if I wanted to play chess, I would play chess. And the whole idea of like, I move my unit, you move your unit, you move your unit, I move my unit, is so boring. I like the idea of the, oh, let's pull a dice out of the bag, so it's all random movements, and then we move in the shooting phase, and then we randomly shoot. It makes it feel much more like an RTS. So I'm probably going to put it in A tier. So here's my debate, is I don't think is so good that it should go over Heresy 1.0. I think it's just as good as Heresy 1.0. They're just two sides of a coin, because a lot of the stuff they've done to try to improve 1.0 created its own issues in 2.0. However, 2.0 is still so much more fun to play than quite a few of these, especially shit like 5th and 6th edition. I have to say this, is stuff in 5th and 6th edition, it really feels like the community itself was keeping this game alive, because the community stuff I've seen during this edition, especially like Badab War stuff in Vrax, looks awesome. So it felt like the community was really together during these two editions, even though I don't know if they're necessarily the best editions. I mean, I don't have as much experience with these, but at the same time, a lot of these are just better. Like, 8th edition is just better than 5th edition. But they also were trying to achieve two different things. And 5th edition didn't achieve what they were trying to do. 8th edition achieved what they were trying to do. And this is where we get into the dreaded 10th edition. 10th edition. The edition you either love or hate. And I think it's pretty clear from my earlier statements about 10th edition that I don't like 10th edition. But I do want to put a disclaimer out here. Before recording all this, I did a lot of research. I also talked to a lot of people, and there's quite a few people who like 10th edition. And this is for a variety of different reasons. And I don't think we should attack one another because of the edition of Warhammer we like. Play the whatever edition you like. However, I don't like 10th edition. And I'm going to be honest of why I don't like 10th edition. And it might piss people off, but I would love to hear in your comments, I would love to hear in the comments why you like 10th edition. And I've also had quite a few conversations with people on Discord of why they like 10th edition. And I think those points are valid. Stuff like the ease to learn to play the edition is valid. The smoothness of the game itself. It's a lot faster to play. That is true. It's a lot easier to understand what's going on. That is true. It also still technically has narrative stuff in it, even though they're really not supporting anything narrative-wise. You have stuff like the Crusade system, which I have my own complaints of because I shouldn't need to play a bunch of games interlocking together. And yeah, this is complaining about the Crusade system. With how the Crusade system works, because I bought the special edition 10th stuff, and I had the campaign books in there, and the issue is with how they have it set up is it's built like an escalation game. So as you play more and more with these units become better and better and better. But at the same time, if I'm hopping into my local hobby store for a game or two, I tend not to be able to use those upgrades because I'm going to be starting and I don't necessarily want to bring the same list every time. 10th edition actually incentivizes you not to do that, but at the same time it does. So like if I'm playing narrative games in a crusade, it wants me to take the same units over and over and over so they can get extra buffs as they get stronger. But then they constantly release day one patches and FAQs that shake up the whole game. I mean, they literally created a whole new way of movement and then got rid of the whole new way of movement. They constantly FAQ core rules. I mean, look at people who play Kroot. Kroot were not doing well. And then they literally just FAQ'd every rule that the Kroot were not doing well because other armies were doing it better. And just nerfed armies into the ground because of their new design philosophy. They have been so audience captured by the competitive community, who make up very little percentage of this community in Warhammer. The casuals make up the most, that it's not even funny. Like, people I've talked to in the casual community don't see this, and it might just be me who's in tune and spent too much time on YouTube watching Auspex, but it truly is every update you need to get a new army because they constantly change everything. They are so obsessed with getting that 50 mark of being able to have every army winning at 50% that they're willing to do pretty much anything except for actually balance the game. Messing around with overall rules of the game doesn't help anybody. I mean, they literally have like 3 pages of core keywords within the core rulebook, but then I have my core rulebook here, and then I look at the FAQs, and those keywords don't mean what they used to mean, which makes it now infinitely harder for me to learn this game, because they've just changed everything, and then they constantly change everything back. Moreover, they also have decided to then add a bunch of other shit that's unnecessary. For example, why the fuck, when I'm playing World Eaters, do I have to have like a whole table to play this game? No, don't give me a whole goddamn table. They get 1 extra on the charge or something like that. Just take the Blood Angel rules and then put it under the World Eaters. They're the same thing. One's chaos, one's not. There you go. And don't even get me started on the Blood Angels. I was legitimately working in a Blood Angels army, and then that new Sanguinary Guard came out and just killed any motivation I had. And it also killed any motivation in general, because at the beginning of the edition, they looked like they were adding a lot of flavor into this game again, with having stuff like Stern Guard being adopted back into the army, and they're no longer being a firstborn or a Primaris split, but then we're not going to give you any fucking flavor. I mean, my brother plays Space Wolves, and he has Thunderwolf Cavalry, and he loves his Thunderhammers. No, you don't get to take Thunderhammers, you get to take heirloom weapons, and there is no difference between what you monoline on, because nothing fucking matters. I mean, not even the color of your miniatures matter, and the idea that they implemented there is a good idea. You know, it doesn't matter what army you take, you can use whatever you want to use on them, which is a good idea for certain armies, but in general, it's just fucking shit for others. I mean, why can you take a Black Templar army shooting? They literally, that goes against their own rules. Well, it's just, everybody's just now Ultramarines and Blue Armor, and as somebody who's an Ultramarine, that fucking sucks. I mean, I loved the flavor. I liked the flavor. I mean, why the hell are we so overcomplicating the shit? You have Dark Angels, just give them +1 to Plasma, allow them to take a bunch of Plasma shit. Okay, you have Imperial Fists, give them buffs to bolters, you know. Literally what they did in 8th edition is what they tried to do here in 10th, and they just royally fucked it up, which is kind of funny with how bad they fucked it up, because 8th edition with the chapter rules were just so much simpler, and a lot of the stratagems for the armies made a lot more sense than what they have now. For example, why the hell did you take away Ultramarines' rapid redeployment? Oh, it turns out literally every single competitive player was complaining about Ultramarines' rapid redeployment. That explains why you took it away. Why'd you take away the Death Guard's ability to be Death Guard? Okay? And I know some Death Guard player loves the new way they're played. Good for you, buddy. You can keep playing 10th edition. But the whole idea of Death Guard is not what they have here. Because, like, Death Guard was meant to be slow-moving, lingering up the board, and getting to the point. Now they want you to rush to the point and just sit there. But the issue is you have to move up to get to the point. That's the issue. So you move up, you get to the point. That's what your army wants to do. But then your army's rules incentivize you not to do that, and incentivize you to just sit there. And the reason why I bring this up is they fucking FAQ'd the rules. They literally FAQ'd the rules from the original rules to try to fix this issue. So clearly, there was an issue. And the other issue that 10th edition has just in general is just fucking burnout. People don't like the edition, and now that we have to sit here and tolerate the edition, a lot of people don't want to play the game. I know in my local store, it normally was Warhammer was the dominant game. No, Warhammer 40k was the dominant game. Now I'm coming in here and I see more people playing Heresy and Age of Sigmar, or even people who are playing older editions, because they don't like how 10th edition plays. Because 10th edition is probably the most boardified, turning the Warhammer into a board game as we've ever seen. Literally, it feels like board game interactions where you don't need that little charm of lore in the personality, because the whole point of the game is not actually the flavor of the game, it's the game itself. And that's not how Warhammer got started. That's not what makes Warhammer unique, and anybody who disagrees with that is a loser and an idiot, because you don't understand Warhammer. Okay, Warhammer will never be balanced, and if you lie to yourself that balancing is the most important thing to a game, you are dumb, because that is not true at all. Because here, let's look at Rogue Trader. Rogue Trader here. Abhorrent, unbalanced mess. If you're playing Eldar and you're good at the game, you will dominate here. The second edition, same thing. Alright? Third edition, 3.5, fucking amazing. Here, same thing, but it's just a fucking board game. Why are Grey Knights playing like Eldar? They play like fucking Eldar. Why are they teleporting around the board? They're paladins. Why the hell are they teleporting around the board? And also, the Fate dice, you know what? Sisters of Battle, it worked for, okay? It made sense in their flavor of being able to perform a miracle. That's why they had miracle dice. And you know what? It's still bullshit that they can cheat at a dice game, but like, I can at least suspend my disbelief, because it's the Emperor interceding. It's the Saint interceding. Why the fuck do Eldar be able to do the same thing? Like, this is the issue, is none of them have flavor, because everything has to be the same so we can balance everything. Everybody has the same set of derivative rules that we're going to try to match up, and that we're going to try to use keywords to balance, because we have to use this new keyword system that we invented in 8th edition, and yet we don't understand how it fucking works, because we've used keywords in 2 new editions and have screwed keywords up every single time. It is remarkable how bad 10th edition is. And I don't say this to like discourage people from playing 10th edition. If you like 10th edition, go play it. Again, these are all my opinions and why 10th edition is the only edition I have legitimately given up playing. I'm not playing 10th edition at all. I've not played one game in 10th edition in 2 years. When I play, I've played 9th edition boarding actions. Because that's the only like modern era of game people know familiar with enough to where we don't need to pull out a whole new set of rules. And it's really disappointing that, in my opinion, that we've gotten to this state, because people are willing to just accept whatever the Games Workshop gives you. So for that and all these other reasons, 10th edition is the worst edition we have ever seen. I'm not even here. We are row above, row below. Here, do you have brown for dog shit? They don't have brown for dog shit. Here, we'll create this. No, that changed the wrong color. That's 9th edition. Okay. They've abolished list building. There's no such thing as list building anymore. And people go, oh, well, you can still build lists. What lists? I'm literally just selecting a unit to be in the game. It feels like I'm just selecting, like, a bunch of MOBA characters. I can't even go in and, like, change what they have on their unit because it doesn't fucking matter. And, like, the Sternguard stuff, everybody shoots with the same gun, and they might have changed it, but I don't know. You've already burnt me out. How many years do I have to wait? So, there's the ranking of the lists. Sorry it was so negative at the end, but you know, I have to be honest. It's the same thing with like the bolt gun game. I had to be honest. I didn't like it. Anyways, now that you've listened to me ramble for quite a long time, I do hope this at least gave you some interest. And if you guys want me to, I can put up this list where you make your own lists. Please do like and subscribe. And I hope you have a much better day.